My name is Amanda Ring, and this is Flight of the Feminine. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark. To awaken your womb and heart consciousness, I'm inviting you to open to the realms of energy and spirit, to evoke empowerment and create sovereignty. As a sacred soul, each one of you are on this journey through life. Welcome back. Here on Flight of the Feminine, I'm inviting you to explore and reclaim all things feminine, the divine and the dark. Womb and heart consciousness, opening to the realms of energy and spiritual expansion, empowerment and sovereignty as the sacred soul each one of you are on this journey through life. And today, I have a very special guest joining us. Serena Haines, certified sexologist and intimacy and relationship coach based out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Chibuktuk Mi'kma'ki. This episode, In Touch, Let's Get Intimate with the Feminine, is going to be a nice extension of some things that I touched on in episode 3. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, Your Body is Talking, Are You Listening? Be sure to go back and have a listen, as it will amplify what we discuss and share with you today. Serena is not only an expert in her field, a valued colleague, but she is also a sister and a friend, and has been an essential resource for me personally. I reached out to Serena in 2022 as part of my own sexual healing and reclamation journey. I had already been exploring the layers of internalized misogyny that were influencing my personal freedom and aliveness as a woman, as well as within the work that I offer. And like so many women, I had still been neglecting aspects of my own sensuality and sexual exploration. I was acknowledging a new level of awareness of how my feminine sensuality, sexuality was still being repressed due to societal and patriarchal conditioning that I had still deep inside. The more feminine empowerment work I did for myself and led other women through, the more my awareness soared regarding the importance of there being a focus on intimacy and sexual sovereignty for women, with their own bodies and with others. Serena and I explore a number of similar themes in the work that we do with women: listening to the body, intuitive development, boundary work, finding your voice, self-worth, self-love, and self-permission being a big one. So it was a natural fit for me to connect with her. After Serena and I explored some work together, we realized that the goddess was at work and divine orchestration at play. And we followed that inspiration to create our own collaborative women's event, the Body Temple Retreat Day, which was birthed in the spring, and we co-hosted a number of these together. In episode 3, in Flight of the Feminine, I shared information and practices for you to start listening to the feminine wisdom flowing through you and to you through your body. Your womb wisdom, which is your inner wise woman. I invited re-embodiment with new levels of awareness of intuition, instinct, and energy. Listening and learning how to honor your body wisdom is key to your capacity to not only create healthy boundaries, but to say hell yes to life, to your desires, and to create nourishing, intimate connections with yourself and others, both sexually and in terms of authenticity and embodiment. When I began gestating this podcast, I knew I would have this beauty of a human on as a guest. Serena has helped me personally, along with many other women, to open more fully to their sensual nature, to reclaim and trust their bodies, to own their right to experience pleasure and sexual freedom. And in both my personal and professional experience, this truly starts with going within, getting in touch with your feminine nature through feeling, sensation, and becoming intimately connected to yourself. So let's see what Serena has to share about all of this with us today. Serena, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I am so happy you are with us today.
Oh, I was really excited when you asked me to come on.
Mm-hmm.
I get so juicy.
I know. It's been wonderful just even thinking about having you on because this is just such an important area of life that women struggle with. There's so much repression and there's so much that people aren't even aware of. And I know that, and I've kind of thought, oh, I know quite a bit about myself and felt very empowered in so many ways until I started really leaning into this aspect of my life. And then when working with you, I was like, holy shit, like there's a lot more here than I realized. And it's been so liberating. There was no question in my mind, especially after we then worked together, that you were coming on here and sharing your wisdom and your experience with the women that are listening and whoever else
really
is
well
listening.
Together.
Yeah.
You and I, we just jive, you know? There's just something about, you know what I love about you, Amanda, is that there's just something, you're so ceremonial. We've talked about this. You are so ceremonial in the way that you do things. And I'm not necessarily, right? Like I do my own little ceremonies, but they're not near as much as what you do. So just the learning from one another and that back and forth and I think even like the juxtaposition of just the way that we both attack, if for lack of a better word, but come into and embrace the topics that we come into, that we talk about. It just makes it, I think it makes it so much more relatable to a lot of people to have both of us sit there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, when we started talking about the Body Temple retreat, it was like this beautiful synergy of your signature events and the signature work that I do, from that ceremonial, more ancient circle magic type of thing. And then like your breadth of knowledge of both the anatomy, but also this very contemporary, like, let's just fucking go. Let's take this back and be allowed to experience life fully and in this area of our life as well. Because, as I was experiencing, not only myself, but with other women, that there was still this waiting for permission, that it was okay. And there's so much stuck in the subconscious around what's allowed, what's appropriate, what's not, and the whole good girl syndrome side of thing that I brought up in a previous episode. And yeah, I fully agree. We've got this really nice synergy of the raw and the sacred, coming together.
That permission is so important, right? The permission to be able to just let go. And, I walk into my sessions and I say, I'm going to be the weirdest, the most open, the most raw in this room. And the feelings that come up for you, comfort, uncomfort, the anxiousness, all of that, dive into it and let it happen. But I want you to use my presence as your permission to be everything and to experience everything and to let go of everything that you've ever really wanted to.
Yeah. So that sort of brings me to the first question that I have for you today. And that is, when it comes to creating and experiencing intimacy, and it might seem obvious, but it's not. We know how layered it is. So when it comes to creating and experiencing intimacy, why is it so important for women to be in touch with what I call their body wisdom? How their body's communicating to them. Like, why is that so important, especially from the place of work that you come from?
Yeah, well, I call it your F yes and your F no. I'm like, your body will tell you, your body will talk to you, right? And we do that. We do that exercise within workshop to sit and say, just to chant our yeses and to chant our nos and to say, where is this landing in our body? So why is that so important is because if you don't know, okay, we talk a lot in our society about how women need to understand their no, right? We need to feel really strong about your no. You need to stand up for yourself. You need to have that agency over your body. You need to, and it's still very, I don't want to use the word masculine driven, but it's still very hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to find your yes. Where is your soft yes? Because without your yes, you cannot find your no. Mm-hmm. You cannot sit as deeply in your no if you don't even know what your yes is, if you don't know where your softness lands, if you don't know where your power is in your yes, right? Going back to the good girl thing, good girls don't say yes. Good girls say no, right? Good girls push away. Good girls, all of those things. But what if we said good girl knew what her yes was? What if we said, if you know that within your body and you know where that is in your body and you can find, appreciate, give yourself permission and allow pleasure in whatever form that comes in, right? Because we know, you and I know, and I'll let your listeners know that your pleasure doesn't just come from your sexuality. It comes in everything from the food that you enjoy to the music that you listen to the friends that you choose to hang out with. So when we find our yes within our body and we know where that sits, then that leads to that intimacy within self and partnership and others around you in being able to define, to figure out, and to recognize where you truly land, where you truly sit, and where you want to be in life, right? If we're just taught all the time to say no, well, that's where we've been. And that's what's created so much shame. And that's what's created this, because when we do feel that yes bubble up inside, for some reason, we're questioning in it. We're like, we're not supposed to feel that yes. I'm not supposed to want that. I'm a woman. I'm not supposed to speak out. I'm not supposed, all of those things. So we think that women don't know how to say no, but that's all we've actually been taught to do is say no. Right? But in a different way. So I think that it's important for us to listen to our bodies when it comes to our yeses as well.
Yeah. And just listening to what you're saying there, if we don't know our felt sense of yes, like what, and I talked about that in the previous episode, like what lights us up, what we desire, what feels aligned, then we could actually get entrenched in our no. And
Always.
our no doesn't become protective and empowering. It actually becomes imprisoning. Like it's
limiting.
Limiting.
It's like a prison.
Yeah.
And we live in it constantly, right? And that translates into the shame that we feel, and it translates into us living a small life.
Yeah.
It translates into, you living a small sexual experience, just the one that exists in the bed under the covers with the person, and no curiosity or exploration of what else you're capable of.
Right. It's not expansive. It doesn't have that expansive quality. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. And it's so true because the no, rather than becoming protective from that empowered place, like asking our inner masculine to stand up, and even our feminine, warrior energy to stand up and say, you know what? No, this doesn't feel right. So I'm not going there. That's different from being guarded and blocking things from coming in because we're not sure what to do with them because we have no reference point to what our yes is.
Exactly. It's the same as if we walked around in constant light or even constant dark. You wouldn't have a reference for what light or dark feels like. You don't, if we, we always say, oh, it's terrible to feel sad. Well, but it isn't terrible to feel sad. It's wonderful because then you can really appreciate the times that you feel happy and joy, right?
Yeah.
Without both sides, without that whole spectrum, there is nothing. So within us finding that yes, it's going to allow the numbness that we feel to start to dissipate and start to break down because now we will finally have, like you say, a reference point for what that is rather than just constantly going around saying, no, I'm not supposed to. Now you can say, well, I do feel a yes in my body. So when I feel my no, when I feel violated, when I feel like I'm not listening to myself, I'm going to stand in that so strongly rather than question, right? When we're sitting in our no all the time and we sit in this, just this unknowing of what pleasure can be, we question ourselves where we can be, and I say we don't have to be women in order to feel this, just humans in general, but we question our own integrity, right? We question, am I doing the right thing? Am I not? Because we have nothing to compare it to. So I think it's really important to find all of your yeses. I think the no's will come after you find your yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. And that was something that, we've obviously explored together, but also in the Body Temple, just having women have the experience of actually vocalizing no and yes, and how that felt in their body.
And the different kinds of yeses and nos as well, right? I mean, like you say, when we're chanting yes and no, the idea of doing the exercise is to find the different ways that it sits in your body. Sometimes your yes will come out exuberant, and sometimes it comes out very, sensual and really juicy. And sometimes your no will come out very hard and, really strong. And then sometimes your no is a really soft no, and that's an okay thing too.
And even playful.
Very playful.
And that speaks to how we can, once we're actually comfortable with our no's and our yeses, we can play with them in a way that doesn't feel like self-abandonment. So I could say no, and be very coy about it. And it actually means a yes. But if we don't know when we are doing no's and yeses that don't actually mean no and yes, like in an authentic, conscious way, then we don't have that freedom to play with our language. So one of the other things I had touched on, which we talk about too, and I know you support women with, is that when we're saying no and we actually mean yes, or when we're saying yes to something and we actually mean no. But what I feel is really important in what you're saying is when we know our yes, it takes out the confusion and the self-doubt and self-abandonment that no, a hard no to everything can create. Right? Because, and then for women in particular, where there's been this imprinting to say no, or in some cases to say yes, but this no when they really desire something, because it's like, oh, is that appropriate for my age, or for this situation, or because I'm newly in this marriage, or I'm newly out of this marriage, or I'm single at this age, or whatever. There's all these subconscious stereotypes that we've internalized that are picked up through society, family, culture. Then our desires get muddled up in the no, right? So that freedom gets continuously squashed. So how important that is. So I would like to take that a little bit further and ask you, because I know you work with all genders and you do have a passion for working with women as well. What are women tending to repress in terms of intimacy, pleasure, and sexuality? Like what are the trends that you see? Like what are common themes that they're repressing?
Everything. Everything. No, I mean, I smile and I joke when I say that, but, just being able to speak their truth, honestly, right? It really depends. It's a very general question. The idea that, sex in general, like sex specifically, is not supposed to bring pleasure for a lot of women. I see that a lot. I see a lot of women come into me and say, it's okay. I don't need to have an orgasm. And I'm like, silly goose. Yes, it's okay to want that, right? And then we come down to it, and it's not that it's okay with them. It's that they don't feel like they can ask for what they want, right? They just don't feel like they can take up space. So this, working on taking up space with women is a really big conversation that we have. Ask for what you want. Tell me what you want. What are
Voicing their
you
desires.
Yeah. What are you repressing? All of those desires. There are people who come into me who, will tell me that they want, X, Y, and Z. But when we start talking, what they really want is something completely different, but they don't even have the language to say it because women in general have not been given the permission to even say certain sexual languages or, juicy thoughts, fantasies, desires, those kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So everything that I see when people come into me, I just try to like I said earlier, like I said in the beginning, I just try to be the strangest one in the room. I use all of the words and all of a sudden women are like, oh, I'm allowed to use those words. I'm allowed to talk about these things. I'm like, yeah, babe, you are. You're allowed to say and want and do and watch and listen to and all of those things. And that's how you're going to find your true authentic self when it comes to your sensuality.
Right. Your yeses and your nos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of repression, it's like what I'm hearing is there's a tendency to repress desires sexually, sexual fantasies, and even the permission to use sexual language. And that
when we
know.
don't, sorry to interrupt, but when we don't use the language, right? Like this is a big thing in session with me in podcasts and any media that I do or anything, I do try to use the language because that's part of it. That's part of breaking the script that we've been given where, quote, right? Big quotations. Men can use all of the crass words and the dirty words and all of this thing, but women, it's not ladylike. If women do, we have to use other terminology and other ways of talking about things. And it all has to be very gentle and sweet and all of that. There are going to be women listening to this who want to crack open expansively from their heart centers, from their womb centers and all of that. And as well, they are going to want some of the quote, crass, dirty, all of that. And it mangles together and it's just such a beautiful space to be in. And when we stop repressing, when we start using the language, when we allow our nervous system to acclimate to words and desires that we've been taught for so long are the epitome of, quote, filth or vulgarity for women. When we allow ourselves to acclimate to that a little bit more, what we realize is that we don't have to go so far in one direction. It's just that's the way the pendulum swings.
Right.
Once we repress it, then most of us, regardless of what it is, will go all the way to the other side until we find this equilibrium of where we want to live. So I say, you know what? Sit in session with me and we're going to say all the words that you're afraid to say. And I'm going to help you work through it. Where does that land in your body? Why do you feel that way? Where and when do you think that you learned that that was a bad thing?
Right.
And then we move through that.
Beautiful, beautiful segue to the question that I have about, what are the clues and cues in the body that a woman could be paying attention to within herself to know that she's got some sexual work to do or some work around intimacy, even with herself, with sensuality or sexuality. And just what you're saying there is even for women to sit with saying things to themselves, saying things out loud, what their desires are in terms of sexual exploration or what turns them on or what lights them up and seeing how they respond. Because you and I both know as these topics come up and we facilitate, whether it's one-on-one or in groups, and we start exploring this, women have very emotional reactions to even the idea of being allowed to explore this part of themselves. And so all the stories, and that's what you're saying, where does this come from? When did you learn this? Or whose thought is that? Like all the stories start to come up and we can disentangle the story to get at what is that beautiful little light in there that's desiring something. And it could be something very erotic and possibly even quite dark and dirty or what.
Favorite.
Yeah. Right. Like it's again, then we are getting at like how in the subconscious that has been vilified, particularly
Yeah.
for women.
Yeah, if it's
Right.
not light and love, if it's not light and love and
Mm.
fairies
Like
and
the dark
floating
femme.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
where it's completely ignored and it's completely, like you
Yeah.
say, vilified. And
Yeah.
that's not the case because
No.
here's the thing, if we don't embrace that dark side of us, then anything that we repress becomes an obsession. If anything. Okay. And
Yep.
for women specifically, I talk a lot about diet culture. And I can have that comparison with a lot of people, especially a lot of women, where I say, listen, if you were ever on a diet, which all of us have been because of that culture, and on your diet, you were not allowed to eat chocolate cake, I promise you that the only thing that you want day and night is chocolate cake because it's the thing that's been taken away from you. But it's not until we start practicing moderation can we start listening to our bodies and really, knowing what our bodies need and how to, go through life and enjoy the pleasures, the little pleasures of things without being so hard on ourselves, right? Without having all of that guilt. And the same thing comes with our sexual nature, is that the things that we repress, in women, they don't necessarily, I say women, right? When I say women, it's such a generalization, right? I just want everybody to know it is tough to have the conversations. It's so nuanced. However, a lot of the time with people who have been socialized as women, we have been taught that that repression gets pushed deep down. How it shows up for us, how it usually shows up for us is anger and rage, judgment, a lot of judgment, criticism and judgment. Women tend to be very critical and very judgmental of anybody who just owns and showcases their own desires out loud, men or women or anybody else. Men are generally not as critical or judgmental. I said that and then I started laughing because it's a different, that's a different topic altogether. But like within women, we find ourselves judging other women, slut shaming other women, talking about people, being very catty, critical,
and self-critical.
All of those things. And that's what it is. It's looking and, we understand this. Your listeners will understand this. You understand everything that we experience is a mirror. All of the things that we're having that happen in our lives, it gives us a chance to look inside of ourselves and say, well, why am I in this position right now? What is happening within my life that this is showing up for me in some way? It's not always 100% your, issue or problem or whatever, but there's something within you that is being brought up to the surface, right? So I would say to kind of keep an eye, if you find yourself as a woman being very critical of other women, being very critical of yourself because of that, comparing yourself to other women constantly. We all compare ourselves sometimes. That's human nature. That's life. We're not going to, I had a conversation this morning about this with somebody, all of this self-healing and like, we're never going to be fully healed, everyone. Like that, it's a journey. It is a constant
it's an evolution.
Journey, right? So never be so hard on yourself. So if you find yourself being overly self-critical, sit down and ask yourself why. If you find yourself being critical of a partner and judging a partner for their sexual prowess, their, juiciness, how often they want to have sex, what kind of sex they want to have, the kind of, things maybe they watch or listen to get turned on. If you find yourself being really critical of that and judgmental, sit back and ask yourself why. What is it that I am missing? It doesn't have to be the same thing. It's not that you want to do the exact same things. It could be, you could be critical of that because you want that chocolate cake. Anything. It's just that inside of you, you are feeling, I'm repressing something. I'm not living my most authentic self. So when I watch you live your authentic self, it becomes very threatening to my existence. So I want everybody to sit down and listen to that. When it comes to the sexual side of it, the couple of things that I want you to keep an eye on is how you feel when you touch and look at your own body, what that brings up in your belly space, okay? Like in your belly. How does your belly feel? Do you feel sick? Do you feel nervous? What happens within your belly? That's where we're going to hold that shame. And then touching yourself as well and how you feel about that. I always tell women, they go, well, if I touch myself, I actually don't feel anything. I say, well, that, my darling, is the biggest indicator that you have some sexual repression and some things that you need to work on. A numb vulva, a numb vagina, and I don't mean numb as in, like touch your body, like you can't feel the sensation, but you have no desire there, you have no juiciness at all, is an indication that there's something that we can work on. Is it going to fix it completely? Maybe not. Are you maybe just not a overly sexual person? Yeah, that can be it too. That can be it. There are people out there who, truly, genuinely, authentically don't love sex. That's okay. But there is a difference between feeling completely satisfied in that and then knowing that there's something else. And that knowing shows up in other ways, in the way that we're critical and judgmental.
Yeah. And I think there's sort of a fork in the road there that we could go into. But before we go there, so just to sort of recap for those that are listening, 2 key things that they could sense in their bodies is an awkwardness in their abdomen or their stomach or their belly, like a sense of discomfort or anxiety or feeling nauseous, or when the topics of sex come up or there is any self-touch related to sensuality. And it isn't even necessarily sexual in nature, but even if you were, rubbing massage oil on your body and just touching yourself in a nourishing way, which is part of sensuality. It's not necessarily sexual in nature, but if they're doing that and they avoid doing that because they feel uncomfortable and they feel that niggling, strange feeling in their stomach, that's a sign that there's some healthy work that could be done, some healing, some exploration of their sensuality and their sexuality personally, irrespective of partners, irrespective of other aspects of the connections and relationships they have. That is with themselves. And then the other thing I'm hearing is that if they are someone who, in the same vein, sort of want to open that up and they start exploring and there is no sense of arousal, that things just feel vacant or numb, that's another sign, another body sign that there's been repression long enough that that sort of part of themselves is shut down and they don't fully have access. So that's where they could reach out to someone like you and start doing some personal work or start reading
it's
about
all
it.
Personal work, right? And this is when people come in and they say, I want to have a better relationship with my partner. And I say, okay, well, let's talk about you for a second, because we can talk all about how we interrelate with people, but it isn't until you sit with yourself. And I say, well, honey, if you can't touch your own body and feel arousal, how do you expect another person to just create magic with their touch? That's not their responsibility. Your pleasure is your responsibility. Your sexuality is your responsibility. That agency that you have over yourself, it's all within you. And when a woman becomes so alive that the touch of her own skin on her own skin, it doesn't have to be sexual in nature, right? It's just sensual. It's erotic in the most pure sense. We use the word erotic so often in our culture that it's just always associated with sexuality. But, eroticism is just a joyful, playful way of living. It's infusing your life with joy and playfulness, curiosity. So having that, it awakens you from the inside. And then you can have those expansive experiences with anyone. I have people who are in casual relationships and we work on how they can have the most expansive relationship in a casual setting with people. We always think the only way to have the most amazing sex, the most amazing erotic time is with a long-term partner who knows my body, Nope. The way to have the most erotic sex life, sensuality, aliveness in your body is for you to have that connection with your own body. And then you get to share it with whomever you choose. And you also get to protect yourself from whomever you choose. So it is all within They're, as within, so without. I mean, if you don't feel it on the inside, then you can't bring that to another partnership, regardless. It could be your friendship, your family unit, business.
Yeah.
The way
And
we do one thing is the way we do most.
Exactly. And I just love everything about this, because this is about coming within and really going in and nurturing this within ourselves first.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes to how we've also ended up in these situations and in connections with people where they're also sensing, or both people are overriding, this inauthentic connection. The intimacy is lacking because we're showing up, and a lot of women fake, and not only women, but there's a faking of this connection, because
Don't
it's what
get me
they
started on faking.
I know, but it's like they want the feeling, they want the experience, and they, of course, each person wants their partner, whomever they're connecting with, to feel like they're being satisfied and all of that. But it breeds this inauthenticity. Yeah. And it also still externalizes the action. So it has to be about that rather than about going in. And really, women have not been socialized to know that it's, number one, healthy and natural, but also safe and fully an equal part of life to have a sexual relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
100%. Women have been taught that it's dirty, don't touch yourself, you're a dirty girl if you like that, and then fill in all the archetypal stereotypes that are the bad ones, And just before you speak to that, if you hold that thought for 1 second, what you were saying also about this sensuality having an erotic nature that's just so pure. It's about being alive in this enlivened state, because that's really what pleasure is, and it can be in any form. That's what I was just speaking about in the last episode, about how the breath can have an ecstatic quality. We can have an ecstatic experience of life that could be sexual, it could be spiritual, and those could be synonymous. You can have a sexual experience or a sensual experience that is out of this world. It's completely ecstatic. So we've gotten really muddled up in society about how, ecstasy and eroticism can only be in this very limited, bandwidth of sexual experience. And then, of course, it's broken down into the good ones and the bad types, So this coming back to women having permission and actually claiming it and realizing that they have a body that's their own, and it's their own right to explore it and start that work within is so powerful.
Women who are connected to their bodies are not easily controlled. So that's another episode too.
I know.
So there are so many reasons why our pleasure has been outsourced to men. For the record, I just need to make sure that everyone knows, we don't man bash.
No,
it's not
100%.
men. It's the patriarchy, right? It's a system.
Yep.
It's, it's certainly not your neighbor or your husband or your brother, it's just the system. And it's not just men. I mean, it's just misogyny and the patriarchy in general. And that is infused in all of us women. When I talk to women about having internal misogynistic qualities,
tendencies,
a lot of women get very defensive and say, well, no, definitely not. But if you really dive in, we all have them a little bit, and we have no choice. It's the system that we grew up in. So it's not a fault. It's just something to recognize, and then we can work on. But, a woman in her sexual expansiveness is extremely hard to control. Thoughts, pleasures, just that agency over ourselves. And that's a new concept, Amanda. We weren't allowed to have debit cards until the 70s, right? We weren't allowed to own land until, after I was born. So when we really get into these, earthly things, it's so new for women to have any control, right? Our feminist movement, like I said, on that pendulum, took us all the way to the other end where it ended up being a lot about man bashing and all this stuff, but it's not. And we need to make our way back into this beautiful balance of just understanding that a woman who owns her own eroticism is a powerful force. And then, girls, we need to use our power for good and not evil.
Yes, that's right. It's a true.
But it's true. So, a lot of the time I say to women when they come in, and this has happened more times than I can count on my hands, women will come in numb. They will open up and just blow shit up in their lives. And then they come back to this balance. And that is the process of healing. You have to just like the Big Bang, just like any spiritual explosion, we explode it all out. You become so aware of all of these things. It shows up then in rebellion. It shows up in anger, angst. It shows up with, it looks angry. It looks like rage. Dark feminine is fine, but then there is a difference between embracing your dark feminine and just letting your rage out. And that's really important as well. But then once we can harness that energy, then we bring it back into this balance and we say, okay, all right, I see this. I don't need to go out and make a mess of everything, because that's what we do. We are pure and beautiful and powerful chaos on the inside. That chaos has been bottled so tight.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's that repression. And then when it's allowed out, I mean, my goodness, it's like a teenager who's never been allowed out of their room. They're just going to go crazy for a minute until they come back to themselves. Yeah. So there is a process. There's a curve of learning, and I see it all the time. It's almost without fail. So honestly, that's my place, is to hold that container for people and to
educate.
Sit and say, everything that you're doing is okay. Let's evaluate why this one's happening. Let's evaluate why that one's happening. The biggest starting point for anybody is to learn how to look at their own body, just to look at it. Just stand in the mirror in the morning and look at your body completely naked. And I challenge you to not say one bad thing about yourself.
Yeah.
And when you do, you stop the exercise, you move on, you try again tomorrow, because we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. And this whole aspect of even seeing the body and the education piece that you provide too is so many women don't understand their anatomy and the anatomy of arousal. Yeah. So they could start exploring touching their own body in a sensual way or a sexual way, but they actually don't know how it all works. And it's just been hit or miss. And just like everyone on the planet who's gone through puberty and their sexual awakening, a lot of people didn't have a lot of guidance with that. And it was trial and error. And it was by what your friends said or what you saw in porn or what you saw in a magazine or whatever, you witnessed. But there wasn't like true education. And again, I would be so bold as to say, intentionally, there's been a lot of disregard for proper education around sexuality and sexuality for everyone, not just women, but for men as well. Not understanding how their prostate is essential to their overall health and how different parts of the body evoke arousal and how that can be expansive, right?
When we wake up our bodies like that, we start questioning everything else around us. And they don't want us questioning things, right?
No.
So when we wake up that body, when we wake up those lower energy centers, I mean, that's our connection, right? And then moving up through, I mean, you and I know just how much we work with our heart space and, moving that energy up through our bodies. It's just one of those really powerful tools that we can use. But you're right. It has been intentionally not taught to us.
Well, this is the seed of Shakti.
Yeah.
Shakti and Kundalini are at the base of the energetic system. And they are in the root and the sacral.
Right. And this is what we want to try to wake up. This is what we're doing, is allowing that we're kind of like shaking. Whenever I visualize it, it's like shaking the dust off, but it's not just dust. It's like hard cement. And we're just like cracking that open. And this is it. When that gets cracked open, it can move really quickly in some people, and it moves very slowly in others. And that's okay too. But when it does crack open, there's really no going back. Once you know, you know. And I love that. I love that when people come in, they go, oh my God, like I didn't know that this was even possible. But just to your point of, the sexual education that we get, we have sexual education based on religion and based on procreation. And we won't get into it too deeply, except to say it's very penicentric, right? All of our sexual education was always very penicentric. If you go through any textbook, any, young adult educational book that is in schools or, all of those things, age appropriate things, it's very penicentric. And the clitoris is not actually labeled in any of those things. And when I ask women who are of a certain age, my age or older, and I say, well, what is the male sexual organ? Do you know? People will go, yeah, penis. And I say, well, what is a female sexual organ? And they say, well, the vagina. I'm like, no, the vagina is not actually an organ at all. Some people will say the uterus, and they're getting closer. But I go, no, that's not it at all either. Your center of pleasure is your clitoris, and your clitoris is very huge. It's a massive organ. It has just as much erectile tissue as a penis does. It takes, not 45 minutes, and it's not that complicated. It just takes awareness, right? That's the other language that we've been taught a whole lot is women are so complicated. Their bodies are so hard. And no, it isn't. It's just that nobody told you exactly how to do it. They kept you in the dark. They kept you in the dark, so you've been having shitty sex for a really long time.
Yeah.
And if you don't
just pleasure. And one of the things that you and I've talked about, and we talk about with our prospective women, is that it's not all about penetrative sex either.
At all. 80% of women, 87% of people with a vagina have no pleasure, very little pleasure with any sort of insertion in their vagina.
Well, especially without including some clitoral stimulation or
our
like,
clitoral, need our clitoris stimulated. I mean, that's it. And the idea is, it's really funny because even when we talk about like G-spot things or anything on the inside of the vagina, anatomically, if you get into a room with me, I'm going to sit there and teach you that as not vaginal stimulation, it's actually the backside of your clitoris that is being stimulated and all of the erectile tissue that is attached to your clitoris. So it all goes back to that. Barring your cervix, and then your cervix is the most magical place in the world to have expansive, imploding, energetic orgasms. And that's a different, kind of feeling altogether.
And so this is just a huge topic, and likely we'll chat again just about more of this because it's so I just see women's faces, and I was one of them, deer in the headlights, how have I not known this? How did I not? I mean, there were basic knowledge, but the intimate aspects of anatomy, and for men as well. And men don't know this either.
No, exactly.
And also women can't direct them if they're in hetero, whoever the partner is. Women who have clitorises and vulvas, don't know their bodies well enough to even guide someone else. So
I say to people all the time, especially men, I go, guys, imagine a life where you've never touched your penis. And they're all like, what do you mean? And I go, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the women that you're with, if you're with a woman, more likely than not, if she has, she's not continued to, and she's been told that she's not supposed to touch it. And then I say to the women who are, and I'll just go back, a half an hour when you said about faking it, for the women who are having sex and they're faking it just to get it over with, you're teaching your partner to touch you the wrong way every single time you fake it.
And that has to be self-responsibility and self-accountability there.
Your pleasure is your responsibility.
Yeah, we can't blame our partners for that. We have to recognize that our subconscious and our consciousness has been so manipulated that it's our responsibility to then go in and start exploring. And when things start to surface, get curious, be compassionate, and also have the courage to go, I want to know more about this. Yeah. I want agency over my body. I want pleasure in my life. And that's why so many people, not just women, that are walking through life with this deep sense of dissatisfaction, even though they have so much, in terms of material and possibly even really supportive, intimate connections, but they don't feel the juice of that intimacy. No. So
No.
I think that's a beautiful place to sort of end, to invite women to start getting more curious, to pay attention to what their body sensations are when they start exploring their own body, both sensually and sexually, and to reach out for support and education with a sex therapist or resources. And maybe you can share a couple with me that I'll pop in the show notes, and we'll definitely have your contact information in there for group events and one-on-one work. But just so that there's this invitation to start going in and stop projecting out the blame, and us acknowledging misogyny and the patriarchal influence isn't about blaming, it's fact. It's about acknowledging this has had a negative impact on everyone, because equally this has impacted the men that I've worked with, where we talk about these themes as well. Their life force energy and their kundalini energy is getting overstimulated and over released as well. Like there's different ways that they have been socialized to not harness that sexual energy to have more expansive connections with their partners and long lasting or sustaining sexual erotic experiences. So it's across the board, because that it doesn't matter gender or sex, really. So I would love to have those, resources. We'll throw them in the show notes. And so the invitation really is for those that are listening to start to get curious about this with your own self, your own body, your own feminine wisdom that's speaking to you through the body, through your breath. And we didn't even touch on that. And I'd love to talk about that more, how the breath influences our experiences sensually and sexually, and how we can guide that, and also how it's speaking to us. But that'll have to be another time. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us, and imparting your wisdom and excitement.
Absolutely. Anytime. This is my favorite.
Yeah. And so thanks to everyone who's listening for your openness and curiosity and being with us on this episode of Flight of the Feminine. And be sure to join me for the next episode, episode 7, where there'll be an extension of these themes as we discuss boundaries. So this topic is better boundaries. Episodes drop every second Friday on all your listening platforms. So please like and share, and I look forward to seeing you there. It's time, my sisters, to elevate your mind, expand your feminine heart, explore your inner wisdom. Let's soar together. Sending you all big, big love.
This is Story Studio Network.